Architecture shapes our built environment. It is more than a combination of art and design fulfilling a utilitarian purpose. It is a reflection of a society's values and aspirations. At its most powerful, architecture can be transformative, not only creating spaces that inspire, challenge and delight, but can forge a path for society at large and provide a tangible vision of what is possible. Across Australia, architects, urban planners and community leaders are using community-focused design to solve real-world problems and create more sustainable and inclusive environments. Join us as we explore how design can create vibrant and healthy local communities that foster connection and local engagement. Yarra River, Melbourne, one of Victoria's most iconic landmarks. At an impressive 242-kilometre long stretch, the Yarra River, originally called Wurrung by the Wurundjeri people, flows through the heart of the City of Melbourne. It is the vibrant centre of many arts, food and cultural events. Now there is a new environmental purpose. In this episode of Community Designs, we focus on the Yarra River Wetlands Trial Project. The City of Melbourne has installed floating wetlands in the Yarra River, Wurrung, as part of a trial project to understand what benefits they might deliver for the river, wildlife and the community. Take a stroll along the Yarra River walk and you will find the floating wetlands. There are 3 wetlands currently installed. They are in the Turning Basin, Enterprize Park and Victoria Harbour Docklands. On each of these islands, you will find unique birds and plant species. This episode looks at how unique and revolutionary architectural designs have the ability to breathe new life into our community.
The floating wetlands trial here on the Yarra is really an important project for us to learn more about what species can flourish here on the Yarra River and the Yarra River banks. It's important for us that we're able to use Greenline as a project to return the north bank of the Yarra back to its natural habitat, and to do that to reintroduce lots of native species. Of course, the condition and components of the Yarra has changed over time, and so this floating wetlands trial gives us the opportunity to test and then understand what types of plantings and what types of animals can flourish in this modern environment.
This project's a really great collaboration between the University of Melbourne, the City of Melbourne and Wet Systems, and what we've tried to do is bring a little greenery back to the Yarra River. So it's quite a hard city river, you can see all these hard concrete edges, and that's not great for wildlife. So what we've tried to do with this project is add some of that habitat back and bring wildlife back to our city centre. As an ecologist, my role was to come on board and have a look at what kinds of animals these wetlands might attract, what kinds of things we might need to add to the wetlands to attract them, and then to evaluate our success and see what we can learn about how well these have worked, what sort of wildlife we've seen on them, and how we can do it better in future.
Melbourne Water's role in the project really is to work with the council to make sure the wetlands are fulfilling their function, which is to improve the water quality, to create the habitat, but also to make sure it's safe in the river. It has no adverse effect on flooding or on public safety. So we really work with the council to ensure that.
I think already the floating wetlands have had some outstanding outcomes. Community engagement is one of them. It's really very inspiring for me as Lord Mayor to see the interest and passion and commitment that community have to these really important questions and outcomes that we seek at the city. We've seen community involved in the planting of the wetlands, in the monitoring of the wetlands, and certainly in continuing to push and motivate us to achieve the best outcomes we can on the north bank of the Yarra.
City spaces are really important for wildlife conservation. We know that there are sometimes hundreds of species that can live in cities, even endangered species. And they're a great place to connect people with that nature as well. So anything that we can do to make cities better places for nature is a great step forward.
We know that we have a growing population, residents, number of workers, number of visitors, students, etc. And the pressure on our existing green open spaces is enormous. So creating a new green corridor for 4 kilometres from Birrarung Maar to the Wurundjeri Bridge, which is the Green Line project, is a standout feature. One, it's got resounding popularity amongst the public, but we know that it's really necessary community and public infrastructure for the future.
Floating Wetlands, a fantastic project that really helped bring to life the direction and focus of the Yarra Strategic Plan. It actually brings together the core elements, the biodiversity and habitat values, the social values, so people coming down and using the river, and also the cultural elements, so strong traditional owner cultural elements associated with the wetlands. When you think about the Yarra, or the Birrarung as we call it, it rises on Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung country in the upper parts of the Yarra catchment, flows down through farms and forests and suburbs till eventually arriving here. So we're near, or we're on Wurundjeri country, and then the river flows down to the bay, which is Bunurong country. So it traverses 2 significant cultural areas in Melbourne.
I love anything that is adding nature to cities. So often we focus on trying to prevent the loss of nature or protect existing nature, but this is creating a new space for wildlife and nature in cities, and that's a really rare thing to do, and I think it's absolutely wonderful.
And really, show Melburnians what the Yarra, the values of the Yarra and how they can connect to it. And there's no better place than right here in the city to do that.
The Floating Wetlands Trial, I think, really demonstrates the partnership and collaborative approach to bigger projects like Green Line. Transforming the north bank of the Yarra for 4 kilometres is a city-shaping project, and it starts with the collaboration and partnership demonstrated here with the Floating Wetlands Trial to have university, their expertise and research capability, to have community involved, to have the city and state government working together. This is a wonderful demonstration of that commitment that gives us confidence that not only will we learn and then deliver the right sorts of planting and the right sort of environment, but that we can continue that work to deliver big city shaping projects as well.
Coming up next, we take a deep dive into the intricate designs of the floating wetlands and how each individual wetland contributes to enhancing the diversity of the ecosystems and to a sustainable future for the community.
The floating wetlands that you see here, these 2 larger floating structures with the plants growing on them, it's actually comprised of a modular system, and the fundamental module is about 1.2 metres wide and about 3 metres in length. So we can put those together to form the overall shape that you see, and then so that gives a lot of flexibility in the design and the way that the final system can look, or the wetland can look. The structure itself is composed of a buoyant framework of polyethylene, robust plastic buoyant structure, which is specially sort of heat welded together to make that buoyant modular frame. Then we basically essentially bolt those together in each corner. There's stainless steel flange brackets with a series of bolts then at each corner of a module. Each module is bolted together and collectively to form the overall shape that you see here. We have different design options or module types. What you see here at this site is one of those, what we call the 3D system. In detail, the plastic substructure, if you like, is wrapped in a coir fabric, which is basically brown in colour, and it's a natural product. And that from day one gives a soft, natural appearance to the wetland. Other systems that we have, a 5D system, we use the plastic substructure and then have a bit of edging around the whole wetland, and we then top dress that with a layer of mulch material and then plant into that.
There are 3 different plant communities across 3 locations, which have been designed to reflect the slightly different conditions in each location.
We've tried to think about the whole system. So each of the wetlands has a different plant palette, which means it has a different set of plants that are suited to different parts of the river. They might be more used to saline water, or they might be part of a different ecosystem type. And that means we can start to look at whether different plantings attract different wildlife to different parts of the river.
What we've planted here at each of the 3 sites for the project are all native, locally occurring Indigenous wetland plants. We've actually planted more than 60 different species across the 3 sites.
1/3 of Victoria's animal species and over 190 species of birds are found in the broader Yarra River catchment.
There's a really great variety of birds that you can look out for on these wetlands. So we have Pacific black ducks and chestnut ducks. We have all different types of cormorants. They're the diving birds that you'll see drying their wings out in between fishing trips. The seagulls are obviously very busy at this island, and the black swans.
So the fact that we have swans and birds nesting and breeding on the floating wetlands is a major successful outcome and demonstration of how the floating wetlands, and the fact that they're an island away from the shore, separated by open water, it makes them a safe haven from predators.
The other thing that's been really great is see sort of a whole life cycle happen, where we've seen birds come to the wetland to feed and then build nests, and they're even starting to raise young.
Careful planning and design went into each of the floating wetlands to ensure accessibility for all birdlife and wildlife along the river. The additional habitat these islands provide aim to enhance the diversity of the river's ecosystem.
One thing that's obvious, you can see there's a kind of a gooseneck bird perch on the left island there, and there's 4 across these wetlands. So they're bird perches for different birds to come and sit on and perch on, and we wanted to create a somewhat dynamic 3-dimensional structure for bird life and for wildlife to come and use. You can see some rails there. They're drying banisters. They're on the edge of the wetland overlooking the water, and the idea there is to provide a space for things like cormorants or shags to perch on there and then dry their wings and sun themselves and so on. You can see there's a coot on a ramp there, so the lighter timber-coloured structure in the middle of the island there. There's one on each island there is what we call a riparian ramp, but it's basically a ramp that just dips down below the water level for about 1 metre, and it just allows then access for swimming birds and floating birds to get from the water up onto the wetland. Inside the wetland we've actually left some open water spaces, and so that's just basically a vacant module in the middle of it, which creates then a sheltered open water zone where we've seen ducklings and cygnets of the black swans taking their first kind of paddles in there and learning to swim, like a safe training swimming pool for young birds. But also potentially, and the idea was that things like the ricali, which is the native otter or native water rat, to provide them access where they might swim underneath and come up, or even cormorants and things and darters which will swim through the water, and it can actually emerge up through those open water zones and come onto the wetland.
We have discussed how the design above the water plays an important role in supporting the ecosystem of the river for birdlife, plant growth and other wildlife along the Yarra River. But equally as important is the ecosystem in the river.
What you see above is half the story. The other half is what's below and what's in the water and submerged below the wetlands. So underneath that structure, then the plant roots actually grow down, and some of those plants will grow down to a metre or more, And then that creates a really dynamic and diverse sort of habitat and micro environment under the floating wetlands. And that it can also play an important role for cleaning the water that's flowing underneath. A diverse population of bacteria and algae and things growing on those roots, and a very kind of, it creates like a fine net or web which can then trap sediments that are suspended in the water and remove pollutants from the water and clean it up.
While not immediately obvious to passers-by, an integral function of the wetlands is the engineering below the surface, with each of the floating wetlands safely anchored in place and built to accommodate changing conditions.
There's 4 anchoring points in each corner, if you like, where we've attached a heavy gauge chain, and then that goes down and we've installed anchor blocks sitting on the bottom of the river, and then quite a long length of chain to those anchor blocks that's then got enough slack in the chain that they can go up and down with the tide. The chains are crossed at each end, so it restricts their lateral movement. That anchoring and especially the weight of the blocks sitting on the bottom of the river is the critical bit that's sized, and the mass of that anchor block is sufficient to withstand the strongest velocity of flow, and also considering wind in the same direction as the river flowing all at the same time in a completely perfect storm scenario, then yeah, these wetlands aren't going anywhere.
We've discovered the importance of the wetlands, its purpose, how they were constructed, and the functionalities of each of the islands to support native flora and fauna. The team involved have clear goals for its future, the future of the Yarra River, and how the Melbourne community will benefit from it.
So far, I'm really excited about how the project has turned out. We've already seen wildlife using the wetlands, and we've already seen incredible engagement with the people of Melbourne. So citizen scientists are always reporting things to us. That's how we discovered the first swan nest on the floating wetlands, was citizen scientists that were really passionate about nature in cities. Contacting us on social media or via platforms like iNaturalist to say, we saw this and it was fantastic. And that's a real success for me. And I think the other thing about these wetlands that I really like is just how they're giving a platform to nature in cities. So a lot of these species might already have been here, but they just went unnoticed. And now they're literally being platformed for people to see and come and sit and have lunch while they're watching the cormorants have a play.
The day we installed them, it really captured people's attention, and we had people coming down and talking and wanting to find out, what we're doing and what's all this about. A lot of traffic of people walking, riding bikes and coming past on their way to work or going home every day. So there's a lot of exposure, and it's remarkable how much they really capture the public's attention and the community focus.
The main positive outcome is really bringing people to the river and connecting the river values to community, and for community to be at the heart of the river. Too often people just see the river as a flowing piece of water that they don't really connect with or can't connect with unless they're actually on the river. So to see the floating wetlands, see the wildlife, and seeing the water quality being improved, it really connects people to the river. And we're really learning a lot also from our traditional owners who consider the Birrarung a living integrated entity, and that's a new way of managing rivers. And it's only the Yarra or the Birrarung is one of the few but growing numbers of rivers that have that focus.
One of the key future plans is the Green Line project, driven by the City of Melbourne, a transformational program that is set to create 4 kilometres of green space for the community with a strong focus on traditional owner heritage. Installed in December 2022, the floating wetlands will be fully evaluated in 2025 after the 2-year trial period ends.
I'd love to think that the floating wetlands become an embedded permanent feature as the plans for Green Line continue to roll out. They've been so important for this project as a learning, but I think the way that it's enhanced the environment and experience along the river shows that they have great potential as a permanent feature.
This being a trial, the wetlands are relatively small in the context of the size and scale of the river. It's a testing the water, a trial to then ideally scale this up and then learn from this in how we can actually integrate this on a broader scale into Melbourne's waterways and the Yarra River.
So my hope for the future is that we see more initiatives like this, not just in floating wetlands, but in trying to regreen entire banks of city rivers. It's been done overseas with really spectacular results, but I think any initiative like this that aims to add greenery and wildlife back to cities, and one that's paired with really good scientific evaluation, is something that we should all want to see more of.
I've really learnt as Lord Mayor the importance of biodiversity in our city, and I've also learnt more and more about traditional owner, ancient culture and how special and unique it is. And I think the floating wetlands trial and the way that it will contribute to the Green Line project really bring those two features to life particularly. The ongoing sustainability of our city does rely on our continued investment and commitment to biodiversity, and celebrating our traditional owner culture and heritage has benefits for our First Nations people, for non-Aboriginal people, but is also something really unique that visitors ask us about. And by bringing native plantings and environments of First Nations heritage to life, literally, along Green Line, I think we'll add that extra feature that will create attention around the world.
Architecture shapes our built environment. It is more than a combination of art and design fulfilling a utilitarian purpose. It is a reflection of a society's values and aspirations.